Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Learning to Love. I am Jenna Forster, joined by Philip Bear, and we're here on video 2, trying to give a little bit more information out to all of you so that you can understand some of these key components of what it is that we're teaching in our curriculum. So welcome, Philip. Thank you for coming.
Thanks. Good morning, Jenna.
Yeah. So today we're going to tackle the subject matter of how we as human beings, as people, we are constantly separating and reconnecting, how that's formed and really how it's playing out for us as adults. So I'm really intrigued to get into this again with you, and because it's such a big concept, and I think once we understand it, then we are then able to perhaps move with it in how we create our behavior and how we move forward. So do you want to start us off and just mention a few things about that?
Yeah, well, the first thing is, what are you talking about, Jenna? Like the separating and connecting from what? From who? And that's really key to what we want to talk about is what's the value of connection, and why does it hurt when we disconnect? And for those people who have some familiarity with the work that we're doing, they'll know to go back to the still face experiment, and that's a 2-minute video that anybody can look up on YouTube about an experiment that was done probably about 30 years ago, and that showed quite explicitly how when a child becomes disconnected from their parent, a very young child, they start to freak out. It becomes incredibly scary for that child. And from the parent's sense, that may not make a whole bunch of sense, because the parent knows that if I can't pay attention to my kid because I have to go and do something at the door, or I have to take care of another kid, or something else is calling my attention away, I'm going to be back in a second. But from the perspective of the little child, they don't know that their parent is ever going to be back to take care of their needs. And that brings up fear. It brings up the fear of who's going to take care of me? Where's my next meal going to come from? How am I going to be warm? Who's going to be there to comfort me? And we're really in that short video instantly see, and this is like instant, within less than 60 seconds, we start to see how quickly a child reacts to a parent who's not responding in a connected way. Mm-hmm. And it's huge. And what the connecting and disconnecting constantly is that was in a laboratory experiment where we get to see this child start crying and really looking traumatized when her mom stopped responding to her. But in the average day, no matter how good a parent is, they're going to be disconnecting from us repeatedly, because they need to be taking care of food and bringing in an income and taking care of their own needs and other siblings and a billion other things. And so here we are as these frail little kids wondering, when's my mommy or when's my daddy going to come back and take care of my needs? Mm-hmm. And when they don't, we start to ramp up our stress levels, and it's highly uncomfortable. And as adults, we've all been through that, and so we carry that around with us, that traumatic experience. And now as adults, when our husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, child, someone starts ignoring us or does anything that withdraws connection, and that sometimes isn't even moving their attention away from us, it could just be something like criticizing us or judging us, then we feel that disconnection. Mm-hmm.
And what I find really interesting about that is how that plays out in our behavior. And as you're speaking about, as we're infants and youth, we start to already learn different tactics and different ways of behaving, different things to do. And I think that still-faced experiment is a really good thing for people to watch, to understand, even as a very small baby, how we're already doing that. But the reason this piece is so important is we start to develop different behaviors and different ways of being and different tactics, different things to do in order to try to create that connection again. And those things really do come along with us as we grow and develop, and they start to become that way of being. So we can move in and out of trying to grasp back for connection without even really being aware of what's happening and that we're even behaving in that manner. I find that really interesting.
Yeah, and I was hoping that you could come up because of your experience in a corporate environment where that shows up for people at work. Like, does anything come to mind for you?
Yeah. So, for an example of that would be when we are in a meeting and there's a handful of individuals in the meeting, and we are trying to add value to the situation by offering some sort of input in the conversation, and the person across from us starts to pick up their phone and check something, or they start flipping through papers, or they look to the side at their colleague, or they're not exhibiting any behavior that says I'm connected to you and I'm hearing you. So therefore our behavior could potentially shift in that moment. So we have then moved away from being effective in what we're trying to communicate out, and instead we're grasping to pull that person back into a place of connection. So these are little ways that all of this information can play out in everyday situations, and that's just one example of that, and how we can perhaps not be as effective as we're wanting to be because we have this whole interplay behind that's affecting how we're communicating, how we're behaving, how we're acting.
Yeah, and I would say, like, going to your example, if we were to look at a chart of what's going on while we're sitting in that meeting or having a conversation with someone that we're working with, we're going to have an oscillation of emotions constantly in the background related to what's going on. But the interesting piece is paying attention to every time we get a big reaction rather than just the small oscillation. And every time we're having that reaction has to do with something going on in the room. And we can bring in that other piece that we often talk about, is that if there's no physical threat to us, and in most times when we're sitting in our work environment, we're not talking about a physical threat. So it has to be some kind of emotional or psychological if it's not physical, because here we are having a big reaction. Mm-hmm. And that's the new piece that we're bringing to people, is the fact that if they trace it back, they're probably going to find that they'll go back to this time in diapers where there was a piece around mommy and daddy not being able to take care of my needs, and just recognizing something in the other person in the work environment, communicating something about you're not important, you're not worthwhile, you're not attention worthy, your ideas suck, or any of those kind of implicit messages that usually we're so politically correct we don't say overtly, but we're always receiving those or thinking that we're receiving those things, and then it sends us back to our diapers.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about that, it's not necessarily about living in the past, it's about bringing it up enough so that we can recognize. I think that's a great word. We're building awareness. So once we recognize that, we are then more armed and enabled to shift away from it by choice, instead of it being some sort of a habitual behavior or pattern that we have collected in our psyche. So bringing these things to the surface in order to shine the light on them so that we can then choose to shift away from them or shift differently, or however we want to engage in a new manner according to who we are right now, not who we were.
And that takes a whole bunch of courage, and that's part of our invitation to people, because when the person picks up their cell phone or they're shuffling papers or doing whatever, we can make it all about them.
Mhm.
but the person who's having the reaction is us. And that courageous part is being willing, or it's not even about courage, it's finding a way. And that's part of what we help people to do, because it's so hard to do this, is to make it safe to stop looking outward at what the other person's doing when I have a reaction, and say, I'm not that interested in what they're doing. What's really important for me is to understand why I'm having the reaction, and how can I safely look at why I'm having a reaction. And that's the art. Like, that's the magic. It happens when someone makes it safe for us to ask that question and to really look at it.
Yeah, and it really is an art. And I love that about this program that we're offering is the opportunity that comes with it. It's just fantastic to be able to really shine a mirror on some of those things about ourselves, and be able to understand them at the level that other people's actions or behaviors or comments or whatever they are not having a direct impact on us. So it's almost like taking the leash off,
Yeah,
and putting it aside. So I think that's really great, a great point in this. And I love that about this work. Well, I think, any final comments before we wrap up today's topic?
just the exciting door that this opens to future conversations, because this is really the basis of everything. And one of the beautiful pieces that we get to see over and over is how people's lives transform radically and relatively quickly once these kind of shifts become safe to observe. So I'm really looking forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this step 2 in the conversation. We're going to be back next week, taking on another subject. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye to everyone.